everyone. I'm Lee Carroll.
And I'm Monica Morani.
Today we're coming to you from our Cryon studio in what is your now time of September 21. Now, September 21, this is a wonderful day that is recognized as the International Day of Peace. However, we're pre-recording this program in advance of that date. Oh, so is it live? How is it not live? How is this experiment going to work? Live or not live? Well, welcome to the field.
I have a question for you. What is it we know about energy? Energy is neither created nor destroyed. Therefore, the energy of our combined intention to come together to focus on peace exists forever. That means that this live experiment began before September 21, but it also means it's occurring right now on that exact date. And yet, it's also going to occur on a future date, whenever anyone connects and watches the replay. Are you confused yet? Well, to help us make sense of all of this and to learn a little bit more about the field and how we can seemingly be in two places at once, let's turn to Lee.
Well, we have to talk about the field in very, I would say, esoteric terms, perhaps not. Maybe scientific, well, perhaps not. You know, when you explain the field, you're trying to explain consciousness and the attributes of consciousness. This is a brand new field, and that is why we're doing the experiments that we're doing in these years on this entire subject. You know, I'm reminded when you look up consciousness and you want to see the definition of it, even Plato couldn't get it. It's a tough one. Spiritually, we look at consciousness as the center of love, of all things. We also have realized through what has gone on this planet and the books that have been written from near-death experiences and all, is that consciousness even remains after death. So consciousness is a biggie. So when you start looking at what the attributes might be, it helps you understand the field. So you think this perhaps is spooky information? I want you to remember that word. I don't use it often, but somebody else has. What did you learn, all of you, about God? It doesn't matter who you are or what your religion is, all over the planet, we have an idea about God. And one of the ones that even bothered me as a kid, bothered me in a way that was because it wasn't logical, was that when 1 billion people could pray, God could hear you all at once. All those voices at once praying, and there was no problem. This is the first glimpse as a child that I got about the field. How could you have something happening all at once for me, and yet time obviously stopped for God, because God could then dissect every single prayer and help everybody all at once. So the timing of it didn't matter. That is what we would call multidimensional energy. Now, there's been a lot of research, as much as we can do, on things that are multidimensional. I think that in the last years, my lifetime, brought me right into the idea there is a quantumness, I would say, about everything. Now, science started opening that door when they started looking at what I will call dimensionality. We live in 4 dimensions: height, width, depth, and time, time being our 4th dimension. Now, this is all going somewhere, folks, and you'll see this, and I didn't mean to just get technical right off the bat, but I want to show you that this whole idea of the field is validatable. Even before we started measuring it, there were hints of it in so many things. So, scientists are looking at dimensionality, and right off the bat, they discovered, based upon what they then define as a dimension, that there had to be at least 11. Now, that's in the beginning. Now they're up to about 27, I think. But right away, there were 11 dimensions. Now, again, let me rewind. How many do you know about? How many do you live in? How many are you working every day in? 4. So stop everything, stop the discussion. Back then, 11 dimensions identified. We live in 4. What are the other ones? That's a big question. Is it possible, do you think, that we live in dimensionality that is enormous, but we're only then aware of a tiny little bit of it? That's what the scientists say. Now, the next thing is this. Are we able to sense it? Because that's the next argument. Okay, the world has multi-dimensions, physics has it, but we're in 4, so what about the other ones? I mean, why does it matter? Well, here's how it matters. Because subsequent to that experiment, we now know that we are multidimensional. I think the first hint we got of that was more science. I hope you're all right with that. There was a Russian researcher named Vladimir Poponin. And Vladimir experimented with multidimensional energies and DNA. And the way he did it was quite clever, and it was many, many years ago. But what he showed in his experiments, without going through them with you, is that our DNA reacted to multidimensional sources. Now, if we were not multidimensional, nothing would have happened. But the DNA saw multidimensions, reacted to it in really strange ways. Now, if I told you a little more about the experiment, it would start giving you a hint about the field. The DNA didn't care when it was reacting to multidimensional fields because it stayed in its reactive form long after the multidimensional source was removed. In other words, it went against everything we know. The DNA was exposed to a multidimensional source, it patterned a certain way, the source was taken away, and bingo, it stayed there. And it remained there, even though there was not a source there. Now, what we teach, and what you're going to see, is that in this field that we're talking about, that what we do here stays here. Did you get that? Now, I'm going to get to that later. But that's the first violation, you might say, of our 4-dimensional ideas. There are many violations of our 4-dimensional ideas, and the field has them all. First, let's talk about this. Something you all know about, perhaps something you've heard about. What are we seeing in, I would say, humanism that might tell you there's something going on that we don't understand? Let's go right to something that most people have heard about. Identical twins. Identical DNA. What I'm going to tell you has been validated and shown and proven over and over and over. Identical twins on separate parts of the world will have identical, I would say, intuitive flashes. The ones that I've interviewed, especially if they are love-based, emotional-based, they both have them at the same time. So you've got one twin in New York and one twin in Australia, or wherever you want to say, and for instance, there's something happens and their mother's in trouble, or perhaps there's a death in the family. Both of them sense it at the same time. Distance makes no difference. It just doesn't. And when they start calling each other to find out what's wrong and what happened, they'll say, oh, that's exactly when I felt it. So, again, stop for a moment. What does that mean? There is some other kind of energy going on that we have seen. All my life I've heard of this, long before anybody started studying multidimensionality or quantum fields. We were seeing it actually in real life. Now, what is this? It's an attribute where time doesn't make any difference and distance doesn't make any difference. I'm going to say that again because those are the basic principles that we talk about in the field, which I'm going to get to. Time is meaningless. Distance is meaningless. Both of those things were then proven when finally scientists began to study something called entanglement. Now, that's been around a long time. They were working on entanglement, and they had discovered it even when Einstein was alive. When Einstein first saw the results of the first entanglement experiments, I'll tell you what he said. Let me tell you about what they showed. They cut, believe it or not, a photon in half. That's pretty remarkable they could even do that. And half of the photon was existing in an instrument in one part of the world, and half of the photon was existing and being sustained in an instrument on another part of the world. When they touched one, the other one moved. And it doesn't matter how far apart it was, it moved instantly. There was no delay. Now, what do you know about R4D? It means anything that we have on this planet that has to do with communication. I mean, at the fastest, it's going to be at the speed of light. It was faster than the speed of light. So they computed it, and they saw that. Now, that's impossible. So what they saw was all of this action at a distance in real time. Distance make no difference at all. So that was called entanglement, and Einstein, he had a statement about it. He saw it, and he said, very profoundly, "This is spooky action at a distance." Do you see where I'm going with this? This is the basis of the field. There is perhaps a multi-dimensionality around us that contains, guess what? Consciousness. That thing that we now understand is also multidimensionality. We are multidimensional beings, even though we live in only 4. But our body uses the rest of it. Identical twins are human beings living in 4 dimensions, but communicating who knows how many. They are using entanglement. Are you interested? This is the basis. What if consciousness could be put into that which we call the field and go everywhere at the same time, just like entanglement, by a human being? It gets better. But let's back up just another moment and talk about something we also see that is an example of the field in a very small way, minuscule example, but we've all experimented with this, or at least seen it. I would say seen it, not experimented. You walk into a room and something's wrong. And then you find out that this room has had an argument in it, and the people are still standing there and they're mad. You just walked in on it. You never saw it. You didn't see they were angry, but you knew something was wrong. I think everyone has had that kind of a feeling. You walk in and you go, oh, some energies just hangs there. Then you find out why. Empathic people have this same thing in a much larger scale. They'll walk into a movie theater, sit down next to somebody, and then move because that somebody is unbalanced. What is going on there? Is that telepathy? No. It's an example of the field. In other words, our emotions, our consciousnesses are always being broadcast, even on a very minuscule area, away. We are transmitters, just walking around. Now, that is a way of explaining the field, perhaps in a very small way. But it is the way it works. So imagine that there is around this planet a quantum field, and even using the word field is improper because the field has a definition in 4D, and that's what we're used to. You talk about certain kinds of magnetic fields and all of these things. This is way beyond that. It is something that connects us all in an entanglement way so that when one person or a group of people has one kind of consciousness, it's possible that it's everywhere at the same time. All right, now we're just starting to discover how to use it, how to make it so that we could actually use it for peace on earth. How about that one? And that's the day we're talking to you. Is this possible Can large groups of people affect other large groups of people? How about this? Can one person affect the many? We already know the many affect the one. We've seen that. We're talking about something that's much, much different. Let me give you an example that I had happen to me through Kryon many years ago. Kryon was in a channel, and he was talking to people about the future. And he said something, and it was recorded, and he was in Texas when he did it. And his words were this: "You're going to get a new pope soon, and that pope is going to make the difference for its church. It's going to be a different kind of pope with a different attitude." Those were his words. 13 months later, we got a new pope. Now, if you just stop for a moment and say, what was happening there? Well, most esoteric people will say, well, that's Kryon talking about the future, telling the future. But there's a problem with that, because Kryon has said this: no one knows the future because it's in our hands. In other words, humanity drives day by day what happens on this planet with free choice. We can change it in an instant. We can do whatever we want to it. There's no preset future. Not only that, Kryon went on to say, this future, in this new energy, is not going to repeat itself like history has in its past. We're not going to then have a recurring pattern of world wars. That's not going to happen. And that is what we're also seeing now, a war that suddenly no one wants. The entire world is reacting to that. This is something like we have never seen before. What about this Pope incident? Well, here's what Kryon later identified. He said it was in the field. What was happening at the Vatican at the moment that Kryon talked about the new Pope? The Pope that was existing knew he was in trouble. Now, we don't have all the details. Someday we will, whether it was mentally or physically, but he knew at that point in time, and went to the powers that be in the church and said, I cannot be a good Pope and do my duty with what's going on in my body. And so they set up, the whole Vatican set up to make this shift and change without a Pope dying, to elect another one. That was going on when Kryon gave that information because, are you ready? It was in the field. Everything that happens in these levels, even the deepest secrets at some level, are in the field. Did you know, and Kryon has said it, that all the inventions that we have seen so far in our lifetime, even before our lifetime, were in the field altogether. When one invention was there and they saw it worked, that it literally was in the field. And if you want to see this profoundly, in this country, the Wright brothers, who flew the first powered flight, and you would say, well, they invented powered flight. It was all over the planet at the same time. The U.S. beat the French only by 2 weeks on that invention. If the Wright brothers had stalled their Kitty Hawk experiment, the French would have invented powered flight. It was the same with electricity, radio. We find out later that it was given to this planet through humanity all at once. That's the field. How do you like it so far? So the Pope's prediction about having a new Pope was only available to Kryon because it was in the field. 13 months after he said we would get a new Pope that was different and would do things that were different, that's exactly what we got. I'll tell you a little bit about how this works so you get a little bit more, I would say, of a metaphor. If you take a hot bathtub, not a bathtub, bath water in a bathtub, hot bath, let's say you draw the water, it's there, it's pure, it's warm, it's fresh, it's clean, and you take food dye, only a few drops of food dye, and you drop it into the bathtub. Do nothing else, and come back. you've got a pink watered bathtub. The water's pink. Why? It diffused. All by itself. You didn't have a stick to stir it in there. That drop of water diffused into all of the molecules of the water in the bathtub. That's the field. That's the best metaphor I can give you. A multi-dimensional energy that is ready to have thought in it diffused, and it goes everywhere at the same time. This is actually beautiful. I am a fan. My mentor, Lynn McTaggart, she was one of the first to say, I'm going to show this is real. And she did. With SIPI's help also, it then got to be measured. But Lynn was working on this with her Power of 8 and many things. And that occurred to her, and she acted on it. And I love that she was able to then prove something that seemed so strange to us all. If one group of people in one part of the earth started thinking something, and then you combined it perhaps with another group in another part of earth and another group, could it make an effect on humanity that weren't thinking about it? In other words, the one drop of dye would get the whole bathtub, pieces of parts of the molecule of water that were never thinking about being pink, got pink. Do you see what I'm saying? This has been proven in so many ways, in so many areas, even in small areas. The heart math has proven about the coherence in a group. We did this even in our own meeting. So has Greg Braden. And that is, you have coherence start with one or two people, and you sit there, and without doing anything at all, through measurements, pretty soon the whole room is coherent. This is real, folks. This is an experiment today that we're going to do with exactly that thing that we're talking about, which is the field. Now, if you're interested in this, if you see that this particular thing that we're speaking about is not just a spiritual idea, but has validation, experiments before this, large groups, small groups, and you're seeing it's done with some of the protagonists of this movie through music, through tones. What we're showing, it's a lot bigger than you think, a lot bigger. I want to wrap this up by giving you a question. Is it possible, individually, what we think, the kindness, the compassion that we have perhaps to each other, is it catchy? With what you do as a one person, can that change others? It does, and that's been proven. What you do personally, independently, and how you think and act goes everywhere. If enough of us become compassionate and kind, in touch with others, wanting peace on the planet, that is exactly what goes out. And that goes out to the others perhaps who are not thinking about it, who then become ones who start thinking about it. You see how this is? This is what love is like as well. It can't contain itself in one little place. It spreads. When you're with loving people, you feel it. When you're with angry people, you feel it. Let's take what has now been proven and is scientific and use it to make this planet different. Together, we can change everything. Thank you for listening.